welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, this is Jessica Chotan here with Turn the Page podcast, and I am sitting here with
Marilyn Carmino.
Welcome to our podcast, Marilyn.
Thank you, Jessica. It's nice to be here.
So you had just done a talk at our library, and would you like to tell me what it was about?
It was about the history of the circus and also the artistry of the circus.
Very, very interesting. So, would you like to tell me how you came to do this lecture?
Yes, I would. It was unusual for me. Mostly I speak about biography, social history, and history. I never was a lover of the circus. As a child, I didn't want to go. My mother wanted to take me. And I didn't see my first one until I was about 40. And so I didn't particularly like it. I didn't like the use of the animals. I found it frightening that people would take such risks with their lives doing these stunts.
Sure, yeah.
Now mostly people use nets, but a lot of performers work without a net. So last year I went to Sarasota, Florida, which was where the Ringling Brothers Circus was wintered. And of course, Ringling Brothers closed in that year. It was 2017.
Yeah.
And I went to the Circus Museum, and I suddenly became very interested in it because I realized the amazing skill level of these performers, that it was athleticism at its best.
Yes.
And so I decided to look into the history because I realized that the circus was the premier form of entertainment in the United States for about 200 years, from about 1840 to 1940.
Yes.
And no TVs. Many small towns didn't even have a library, no computers, no iPods.
Right.
So that form of entertainment was really important. When the circus came to town, it was very important for the inhabitants of little towns across America.
Definitely. Now, was there something particularly interesting that you discovered when you started to research this topic?
Yes, I found that the roots of the circus went back into ancient history, farther back even than Greece and Rome, although it came to its full flower in Rome. And many of the aspects that we see in modern circuses were first introduced in Rome. I also found, I think the thing that really impressed me was what it took to transport animals and people in the Ringling Brothers Circus across towns, across the country. Operationally, it was fascinating. You needed 2,400 ears of corn a day, and you needed tons of sugar. So that's one of the things I talk about in the lecture. You never think of the difficulty of getting from one place to another.
But that's actually really interesting when you think about it. So it was almost like its own little economy with what you needed agriculturally. You needed to feed all of these animals and all of these people. And, I know you'd always see these old reels and footage, and even in the old Dumbo movie of a train coming in with all the animals and all the performers. But that's true. I guess I never thought of it. You had to feed all of those people, and that you took and house them. Yes, and that really took a lot. So one thing I actually thought was interesting, and maybe I feel a little sad that I just found this out when I was doing a little research for this. I kind of always assumed that Ringling was a stage name, but it's actually, was it Rungling, a German name?
It may have been. I'm not familiar with the origin of the name, but there were 5 brothers. They were the masters of the circus around 1900, and each one of them had a specific task. So one would negotiate the contracts. One was in charge of procurement of supplies. Another one would do promotion and advertising. So John Ringling once said they divided their tasks, and by doing so, they conquered the world.
Huh. That's a very good. Family cooperation is fantastic, especially in a family business. Yes. Because as a child, you hear Ringling and it sounds like fun and it sounds like a circus. Mm-hmm. So what a perfect name to go into the family circus.
And they really built up the town of Sarasota in Florida because the circus wintered there. When you visit Sarasota, so much of it is intertwined with circus history.
Now, how did they get involved with P.T. Barnum? I know we hear a lot about him and his involvement. Mm-hmm.
Well, P.T. Barnum was the greatest promoter in American history. Nobody knew more about advertising and promotion than Barnum. I believe the two circuses merged at some point, but Barnum was dominant in the last century. He admired his grandfather, who was something of a scheming politician.
Now, is it Barnum that said there's a sucker born every minute? Or is that, I don't know if that's like an actual quote. I don't want to give false information, but I feel like it's attributed to him.
It is attributed to him, and I don't believe he said it.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I'm sure he did, yeah.
So anyway, yes, he was a master at manipulation of the public. He wrote 3 books. His autobiography actually sold almost as many copies as the New Testament.
Huh.
Another book on business acumen and how to avoid being tricked by some manipulator who knew more about.
Wow, that's actually funny. That's almost like, I know if you'd ever heard the story of I think there was a movie, Catch Me If You Can, about the check fraud. He actually, after he served his time, went around and taught different businesses about check fraud. Absolutely. So P.T. Barnum was before Abagnale, I think his name was, teaching people to find fraud because he was accustomed to it.
He certainly was. And his last book was on advertising and promotion. And one quote I know is attributable to him is, what happens if you don't advertise? Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Huh, that's very cool.
And he used to gin up excitement long before the circus came to town. His idea was the circus procession. Some people were so poor that's all they could see. Mm-hmm. But it motivated people weeks in advance to get tickets for the circus.
That's very, very cool and very interesting. So is there any particular favorite part of your lecture you would like to share with us today?
For me, it's the artistry. The subject of clowns is interesting because they're disconcerting on many levels. I think.
For the most part, I have to say, and it always almost made me sad because clowns, a lot of people are afraid of them, and they're not supposed to be scary. They're supposed to be happy.
That's right. People are afraid of them. It's actually a recognized phobia. About 2% of the population are phobic over clowns, and it's called coulrophobia.
Okay.
But the whole idea of a clown is that he has to retain his humanity and connect with the audience. But the kinds of clowns that we see in this country are very exaggerated. It's called an august clown. That's the type of clown. There are 3 different types. And the makeup is exaggerated.
Yes.
The hair is exaggerated. And that's what makes us afraid. They did an experiment in a hospital in London. They wanted to put up pictures of clowns in a child's ward in the hospital. And instead of making the children smile, it scared them. But the reason is, too, also today, we've had so many creepy clowns.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole new phenomenon.
That was I think, about, 2 or 3 years ago. That was weird.
It actually started many years ago.
Really?
In the 1960s.
Huh.
There was a criminal called a serial killer.
John Wayne Gacy, yes.
And he used to entertain at children's parties as Pogo the Clown.
Yes. Yes, I actually, being a former film theory person in college, I took a class on horror movies, and we delved into psychology, and Gacy was one of the people we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's where the Stephen King It movies come from Gacy, but it really distances us from good clowning.
Yes.
Good clowning should always have a connection with the audience, a human-to-human connection. Interestingly, about clowns, most circus performers are 7th, 8th generation. It's been in the family.
Oh, wow.
And there's a wonderful clown, an Italian clown, David Larible, who is absolutely charming. And that kind of changed my outlook on the circus and on clowns. To watch him is just to be mesmerized. And to be a clown, you have to know every element of circus arts. You have to be able to juggle. You have to be able to do tricks, to do magic. You have to be able to do acrobatics. So to really be a full-fledged clown, you have to know every element of circus arts.
You know what? I never thought of that before, but it does make sense. You know, there's a lot of physicality in being a clown. That's very interesting. And what about mime? Did they take a lot of the American clowns that we know? Did they take any of their, I guess, technique from mime?
Sometimes, and sometimes there have been mimes in the circus.
Right.
Mimes have a kind of people have a love-hate relationship.
Yeah,
with
definitely.
mimes because
Yeah.
they can get on your nerves when they imitate you. I was walking down the street one time in front of the New York Public Library, and this guy apparently was mimicking every
Oh
step
no.
I took. And my father had just died.
No. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's actually a really horrible story. I'm so sorry.
That's all right, but I gave him such a look.
Oh.
But they make you the object of ridicule by other people, so I'm not comfortable with mimes.
Not comfortable with mimes. That
I
makes
cut them out of my lecture.
I don't blame you. P.T. Barnum, I just kind of want to get back to. So he was very interesting. Again, we'd mentioned in promoting hoaxes. Some of he fostered the what was his name? Tom Thumb, I think he went under.
Yes,
General Tom Thumb.
General Stratton.
Okay, yes.
I believe he was called Tom Stratton.
Yes.
He was 3 feet 4 inches tall. Ironically, he was a large baby. He was a distant cousin of P.T. Barnum. He toured Europe. He performed for the Queen. He was a wonderful dancer, a wonderful singer, an all-around great entertainer. He did impersonations of people of the day. He did marry Lavinia Warren.
Yes, he did. And they were, I mean, we actually have some books on them, and I've always found their relationship to be very sweet and interesting.
Yes, and, of course, we get into what were called freak shows, which really...
That is my next question, yes.
That was introduced by P.T. Barnum.
Yes. I actually didn't know that he introduced them. I had thought that, wow, okay.
Yeah, that was one of his inventions. And, of course, you're really exposing people with disabilities.
Yes, absolutely.
Some people were willing to perform because their alternative was living holed up in their house for years.
Yeah.
And this gave them a sense of belonging, a sense of being able to earn their own living. But it also, to be looked at and to be stared at, was a real conflict for many of them. So when impresarios advertised for so-called freaks, many people would respond.
Huh.
So some people did do it willingly. There are so many famous ones. Chang and Eng, of course, the
conjoined twins. Yes.
And in the Middle Ages, it wasn't unusual for people to actually charge other people to look at their children with disabilities.
Really?
Yeah. So, and in the 19th century, no one really thought it was terrible to gawk at someone who was different. And what I found most surprising is that most of the people who exhibited themselves, first of all, many of them made a fortune and were able to retire at a very young age, but they had normal family lives.
Yeah.
So they married, they had children.
I know there was the family with, and now I'm blanking on the name of the condition, but the fur.
The bearded lady.
Yes.
Yes, there was a very famous bearded lady. She was sold by her mother at 4 years old
wow.
into the circus. She had a syndrome,
Yeah.
endocrinological syndrome, and she actually was married 4 times. She had 2 children, but she was one of the people who said, while I'm very proud of having the longest beard of any woman on earth, if someone makes a remark when I'm performing, she said, I'll be depressed for days.
Wow.
So it was very difficult for people.
Yeah.
But happy to know most of them had very settled, happy private lives.
That is very interesting.
The Muse brothers were twin African-American brothers who suffered from albinism.
Yes.
And of course, that was very unusual. No one had ever seen that.
Yes.
Or they were exhibited as ambassadors from Mars, the missing link.
Yeah.
That is a sad part of circus history. And you have to wonder what it says about the viewer. Maybe it confirmed to people that, yes, I'm normal, I'm okay. But it's kind of sad to think our sensibilities are different today.
Yes.
And to gawk at a person with a physical deformity obviously wouldn't be acceptable.
No, of course not. Now, have you heard of any of that still continuing, or has it pretty much all, phased out as the circus slowly came to a close?
Oh, I think those days are gone. Those days are gone.
When I was a young teenager, I guess it was probably around 1990, 1991. I was still in middle school. I had been down in Florida visiting my grandparents, and they took me to a flea market. And it was a circus-themed flea market, and they had an elephant there. And I just remember, my grandparents, of course, they meant well, and they thought that this was going to be so exciting for me and my cousins. And I kind of felt very sad, it was so hot, and the people obviously were just not happy, and the elephants just looked miserable and humiliated, and maybe I'm, projecting my human feelings onto them, but something about this small sideshow at a flea market, it just, I'm pretty sure that there were not being given what they needed.
You're absolutely right. One of the things I point out in the lecture is that it was the elephants ultimately who brought the circus down.
Yes.
When Ringling Brothers took elephants out of the circus, their profits disappeared. And animals have no right to consent.
No.
They're social animals, and they're put in a cage with a chain on them. Elephants in the wild will roam. So they're often separated from their parents, taken into captivity at a very early age. And many of them experience what people would: depression, anxiety, restlessness.
Yeah.
Ringling, it falls under the Department of Agriculture. And of course, they don't have enough inspectors to inspect all these these circuses. Ringling was cited in the death of a lion who didn't have any water. Baby the elephant, at 54 years old, had been traveling on the road for 46 years of her life. And so, actually, there was an animal rights movement that the American Humane Society started in 1877 as a protest against wild animals being used in the circus.
1877?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Even back then. I mean, not that I should consider people back then, not to have thought about animal rights. But, I guess you're a product of your time. So growing up, you hear people say this is wrong. And then on the other side, people are like, what do you mean it's wrong? They're animals. So you always think that these voices are new and that this has not been heard before. But 1877, that is very interesting.
Yes. Ringling at one point in the 20s took the animals out of the circus. Profits dropped.
Right.
Back in. And it's again a kind of sad aspect of circus history, and I'm glad they're gone from. I don't think they're gone though from little regional circus.
No, I'm fairly sure. In fact, I mean, every now and then I'll hear about a fair somewhere, and they have some exotic animals, and I mean, yeah, I guess it'll probably take a while, if not more than that, to stop that. So
one of the interesting aspects I came across is that Charles Darwin wrote in 1859 The Origin of the Species, which of course puts forth his theory of evolution. And so now people are beginning to question, where is the line between human and animal?
yeah.
And that coincides with a lot of the use of animals in the circus, and it's making people really think about it.
Oh, that is very interesting. Yeah, so it was about a 20-year difference between the publication of Origin and the beginning of this animal rights group.
Yeah, this particular
This particular one.
group,
Yes.
Yes.
Huh, that was very interesting.
We're starting to think, well, maybe we are the cream of creation. And in fact, a lot of the lion tamers, that's in response to seeing evolution on a continuum, because if it showed man as the master of all creation because he could tame these wild beasts.
Yeah, it's there's a story from I think it's either the 60s or the 70s where these men bought a lion from Harrods in London. I don't know if you'd heard that story. I mean, really, it is, and this is related in the way that people saw these animals as an exotic commodity. And they kept him in their apartment in London until they realized this is a lion and it doesn't belong in their apartment in London, and they let him go. And there's actually a viral video of them reuniting with him, and he recognized them after he was on this preserve for a while. It's very sweet, but no, lions don't belong in apartments, and they certainly, to be performers, there's some ethical questions that it raises.
Certainly are. There certainly are. I wonder how long it took them to realize that a lion cub was eventually going to grow into a lion.
It's very interesting because I actually went to a big cat preserve down in Florida, and they do rescue a lot of these because there are laws that allow people to keep lions in their apartments still in this country. Yes, so there was a lion that was there that they'd rescued from an apartment in somebody's, I think it was someplace in the Midwest. And the story that they explained was that this woman bought this lion as a cub and thought it would be really cool to have a lion. And then she had a baby and then called them up and said, I hear that you take in, exotic animals well, it's not working out with this lion.
Wonder why.
Because I have this baby. I know.
Well, Barnum was right. There is a
or whoever said it, but yeah. Oh man, yeah. It's really, and he now just before we go on. So Barnum also he did some doctoring of animals to make them look like cryptids. Was that Barnum who had like the mermaid, or was that somebody else?
No, that was in a lot of circuses, but those were contortionists.
Oh, okay.
And so they'd exhibit them as part of the so-called freak show.
Okay.
And they'd say it was the boy frog, so it would be a contortionist, and then the body was painted to look like a frog.
Right.
And it had the human head, and it would hop around, and people believed it.
Okay. Well, entertainment, back then. And yeah, like you said, I guess also a lot of people just didn't see much of that type of thing.
Well, of course not. So,
yeah.
If you were gullible enough, you
would
believe that it was
yes.
man. Particularly the conjoined twins.
That
was real.
Yes.
It seemed certainly like a freak of nature to people, and most people I've never seen in person a conjoined twins.
No. And I guess today there's just so much more known about it because you can research these conditions, and you see videos of conjoined twins being separated. So it is definitely a different time.
Fortunately.
Fortunately.
We progressed on the evolutionary scale.
So do you see any future for circus type events?
Yes, because as I was saying to some of the patrons, you lose one thing and you gain another. And the modern circuses like Cirque du Soleil have evolved into just using the circus arts, acrobats, jugglers, and it's based on a storyline usually. So they've combined the traditional artistry of the circus with a drama, a plot line, and some of these pieces are magnificent. I show a little clip of one Cirque du Soleil done around Michael Jackson's artistry.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's got to be really interesting.
Very, very cool. You feel as if he's there, and the acrobats tumbling to his music are just amazing. So that's the future of the circus. No animals, but retaining that integrity of circus arts.
And humanity, in a way.
Yes, many of them are socially conscious and have a particular political point of view. So yes, it's almost as if they're making up for all the abuses of the past.
So in a way, evolving in their own way.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I've enjoyed it so much.
Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we close this chapter?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, then I'm going to close this chapter of Turn the Page. I am Jessica Chotan, sitting here with
Marilyn Carmino.
Have a lovely day.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.